October 14, 1944, Germany's most famous general, Erwin Rommel, answers the door. One of the visitors is General Wilhelm Burgdorf, Hitler's personal adjutant. Rommel is given a choice: face a public trial or take cyanide. He chooses the poison. 6 months later, Burgdorf is trapped in Hitler's bunker as the Reich collapses in flames. He signs the Führer's final will, then pulls the trigger on himself. This is the story of the man who stayed loyal to Hitler until the very end. Born in 1895, Wilhelm Burgdorf joined the army during World War I. By 1915, he was an infantry officer in Grenadier Regiment 12. He was loyal, dependable, and rigidly obedient, traits that would later serve the Nazi regime well. Despite Germany's defeat in 1918, Burgdorf secured his position within the reduced Reichswehr of the Weimar Republic, earning promotion to captain in 1930 as the economic crisis deepened and political extremism grew. The transition from the Reichswehr to the Wehrmacht marked a turning point for Burgdorf's career trajectory. As Hitler rebuilt Germany's armed forces in violation of the Treaty of Versailles, officers who embraced the new regime found advancement opportunities. Burgdorf aligned himself with these changes, recognizing that military expansion under Nazi leadership offered professional advantages to those who demonstrated political reliability. In 1935, Burgdorf became an instructor in tactics at Dresden's military academy. As a major, he shaped the tactical thinking of Germany's future officer corps. In his lectures, he reportedly emphasized decisive leadership and unwavering resolve, terms that echoed Nazi military doctrine while maintaining the veneer of traditional military education. Each promotion bound him closer to a regime that increasingly valued ideological fanaticism over military expertise. When Germany launched its war of aggression in 1939, Burgdorf moved from the classroom to the battlefield. From May 1940 to April 1942, he commanded the 529th Infantry Regiment during the Soviet invasion, demonstrating competence that satisfied his superiors and led to his next crucial appointment. In May 1942, he joined the Army Personnel Office, first as a deputy, then chief. By 1944, he held two roles: head of military promotions and Hitler's personal adjutant. This administrative position represented a shift from combat leadership to bureaucratic power. His simultaneous promotion to general major placed him at the intersection of military operations and Nazi Party control, a crucial position as Hitler increasingly mistrusted his general staff. Burgdorf's career culminated in October 1944, with his appointment as chief of the Army Personnel Office and chief adjutant to Hitler himself. This dual role gave him extraordinary power over military careers at a time when Germany faced imminent defeat. His rapid rise continued through the ranks, reaching General der Infantry by November 1944, granting him direct access to Hitler when the Führer's inner circle was shrinking dramatically. As Germany's military situation deteriorated, Hitler demanded absolute loyalty. Burgdorf provided exactly what Hitler wanted: unquestioning obedience and willingness to enforce extreme measures against those deemed disloyal. In the aftermath of the July 20th plot to assassinate Hitler, the Nazi regime launched a sweeping crackdown on those implicated. Among the accused were senior military officers, members of the aristocracy, and figures within the Wehrmacht's own leadership. Retribution was swift and unforgiving. Burgdorf served on the Court of Honor, a military tribunal convened not to conduct trials but to expel suspected conspirators from the army. Stripped of their ranks and protections under military law, these men were transferred to the infamous People's Court, where Judge Roland Freisler presided over what were effectively show trials. Alongside generals such as Keitel, Guderian, and von Rundstedt, Burgdorf reviewed cases and authorized expulsions, decisions that for many led directly to execution. Over 200 individuals, both military and civilian, were ultimately put to death in the wake of the failed coup. But some cases required a more delicate approach. The most notable example was Field Marshal Erwin Rommel. Though his involvement in the conspiracy remained uncertain, his popularity made a public trial too dangerous. Hitler needed him removed quietly. And once again, Burgdorf was the man for the task. On October 14th, in the living room of Rommel's home, Burgdorf delivered the ultimatum: face trial for treason or take poison and receive a state funeral, with his family's safety guaranteed. In the heavy silence that followed, Rommel chose the poison. Burgdorf waited downstairs while the field marshal bid farewell to his family. Then Rommel departed with Burgdorf, took the cyanide capsule and died within minutes. The public was told he had succumbed to injuries from an earlier air attack. This execution by proxy revealed Burgdorf's true function, not as a military strategist, but as the regime's enforcer of ideological purity within the officer corps. He had become the man who ensured that Hitler's will was carried out without question, as Germany faced certain defeat in the final, desperate days of the Third Reich. By early 1945, Germany's defeat was obvious, but Burgdorf didn't just stay loyal, he became more fanatical. An offhand comment revealed the depths of his fanaticism. Shortly before the Battle of Berlin, Philipp Freiherr von Boerslager, who was active in anti-Nazi resistance throughout the war, overheard Burgdorf declaring to his fellow officers, "When the war is over, we will have to purge, after the Jews, the Catholic officers in the army." This statement exposed how thoroughly Burgdorf had internalized Nazi racial and religious doctrines. The timing makes this declaration all the more disturbing. Germany stood on the brink of total defeat, yet Burgdorf continued to envision a future of further purges and persecution. By this stage of the war, aligning one's future to the Nazi regime offered diminishing returns. Burgdorf had absorbed the most radical elements of Nazi ideology to such an extent that they formed his worldview, even as reality contradicted every aspect of Nazi propaganda. This moment reveals something deeper about Burgdorf. He felt safe expressing these views openly, expecting others to agree or stay silent. His career trajectory reinforced this commitment through a system of rewards. Burgdorf's rapid promotions from General Major in 1942 to General de Infantry by November 1944 came precisely as Germany's military situation deteriorated. While more capable commanders faced dismissal for tactical retreats or strategic disagreements with Hitler, Burgdorf advanced through demonstrations of loyalty rather than military competence. As his career soared on the wings of unwavering loyalty, so too did his internal justifications for Nazi ideology deepen. For Burgdorf, acknowledging Germany's imminent defeat would have required confronting the moral and practical bankruptcy of a cause to which he had devoted his career and identity. His position in Hitler's inner circle further reinforced this psychological mechanism. The bunker environment created an echo chamber where fantasy replaced reality. Daily situation conferences featured increasingly unrealistic assessments of Germany's strategic position, with phantom armies and imaginary victories replacing actual battlefield conditions. External validation came through military decorations like the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross, which provided tangible symbols of his value to the regime. Burgdorf's case reveals a dangerous combination of factors that produce extreme loyalty. Genuine ideological conviction, career advancement tied to regime approval rather than competence, and psychological mechanisms preventing rational processing of Germany's collapse. The Nazi system brilliantly created and rewarded figures like Burgdorf by integrating ideological indoctrination with career advancement. It produced officials who enforced its will without question, selecting individuals predisposed to extreme loyalty and systematically reinforcing those tendencies. Burgdorf exemplifies how this process culminated in officers who would enforce Hitler's will, even when that enforcement meant death for respected figures like Rommel or ultimately themselves. While Burgdorf enforced loyalty throughout the Reich, his own commitment would soon face its ultimate test. By April 1945, Soviet forces encircled Berlin, leaving Hitler and his closest associates with a final decision: flee the capital or remain with their leader. Burgdorf chose the latter, joining Hitler in the fuhrerbunker beneath the Reich's chancellery, a decision that effectively sealed his fate. The bunker environment intensified the psychological pressure already weighing on Hitler's inner circle. This underground complex, shielded from the constant artillery bombardment above, created an atmosphere of claustrophobic isolation. The stale air hung heavy with cigarette smoke and sweat, while the low concrete ceilings amplified the muffled sounds of distant explosions. The lack of natural light distorted time itself, as occupants existed in a perpetual twilight, broken only by harsh electric lighting. With each passing day, the knowledge of certain defeat pressed down on them like the weight of the rubble-strewn city above. As military options disappeared, alcohol consumption increased notably among the bunker's inhabitants. Witnesses reported that Burgdorf drank heavily during this period, perhaps to cope with Germany's collapse. Despite these deteriorating conditions, he maintained his position as a key figure in Hitler's entourage, participating in the twice-daily situation conferences, where increasingly dire reports arrived from all fronts. These meetings revealed the stark contrast between reality and Hitler's fantasy world of phantom armies and imaginary counterattacks. Maps covered with meaningless arrows and troop formations that no longer existed dominated these sessions, while Burgdorf and others maintained the charade of discussing strategies for armies that had ceased to exist. The final week of April 1945 marked the collapse of Nazi Germany's last defensive efforts. Berlin faced direct assault from multiple Soviet army groups, while Hitler alternated between rage and resignation. On April 29th, Hitler prepared his final documents, recognizing defeat was imminent. Burgdorf's enduring loyalty received its final recognition when he was selected as an official witness to Hitler's last will and testament. By signing alongside Goebbels and Bormann, Burgdorf not only cemented his place in the regime's final chapter, but also endorsed Hitler's expulsion of Göring and Himmler for supposed treachery. This signature bound him irrevocably to the regime's legacy at the moment when others sought distance from it. Hitler's death on April 30th created a power vacuum in the bunker. While some officials prepared to flee, Burgdorf remained, even as escape became increasingly unlikely. In a last desperate attempt at negotiation, General Hans Krebs ventured out to meet with Soviet General Zhukov, seeking terms for the new Dönitz government. The Soviets demanded only unconditional surrender, which Krebs had no authority to accept. His return eliminated any remaining hope for those who had stayed behind. Faced with this reality, Burgdorf made his final decision. In the early hours of May 2, 1945, he and General Krebs took their own lives by a gunshot to the head. Their bodies were discovered by Soviet forces who captured the bunker complex later that day. The death of Krebs and Burgdorf followed the pattern established by their leaders. Hitler and Goebbels had already taken their own lives rather than face capture. Burgdorf's death represented a final act of loyalty to Hitler and the Nazi cause. Rather than face capture, interrogation, and potential trial, he chose death on his own terms. This decision aligned with Nazi ideology, which glorified death over defeat and viewed surrender as dishonor. In the end, Wilhelm Burgdorf died as he lived, obedient, brutal, blind to reality. If you want to see what happened to the man who died beside him, watch our video on the death of Hans Krebs. And if you learned something today, hit like, subscribe, and join us again for more World War II stories.